The gunshot echoing across the dusty plains of Montana Territory was what woke Lucinda O'Malley from her fitful sleep. She bolted upright, her heart pounding wildly against her ribs as she instinctively reached for her baby boy, Samuel, who slept peacefully beside her. It was 1878, and for the past 2 months, Lucinda had been running from a man who had promised her the world but delivered only pain and suffering. "Hush now, my sweet boy," she whispered as she gathered Samuel into her arms, his small body warm against her chest. The 3-month-old stirred but didn't wake, his tiny fist curled against her threadbare dress. Another shot rang out, closer this time, and Lucinda's blood ran cold. She peered through the cracks of the abandoned homestead she'd found refuge in for the night. The silver moonlight illuminated a familiar silhouette approaching on horseback, and terror gripped her heart. Jasper Quinn, her late husband's brother, had found them again. Lucinda had married Thomas Quinn 2 years prior, believing she had found the love of her life. The son of a successful cattle rancher, Thomas had swept her off her feet with his charm and promises of a beautiful life together. For a while, it had been everything she'd dreamed of, until Thomas's gambling debts caught up with him and he started drinking heavily. His death 6 months ago in a saloon brawl should have been the end of her nightmare, but it was only the beginning. Jasper, obsessed with the notion that the Quinn family fortune should remain in Quinn hands, had made it clear he would take Samuel and raise him as his own with or without Lucinda's consent. He'd already tried to force her into marriage once, and when she refused, his methods grew violent. The bruises on her arms had barely faded. "I'm coming for what's mine, Lucinda," Jasper's voice carried through the still night air. "You can't keep running forever." Lucinda grabbed her small bundle of possessions, a change of clothes for herself and Samuel, a few precious mementos, and the little money she had left. She slipped out the back of the homestead, cradling Samuel close to her chest. The night was cold, and she tucked the thin blanket more securely around him as she made her way toward the stables. Her heart sank when she realized her horse was gone. Jasper must have found it first and set it loose to prevent her escape. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as she heard the creak of the homestead door being kicked open, followed by Jasper's angry curse when he found it empty. The barn was her only hope now. Lucinda darted inside, her eyes adjusting to the even deeper darkness within. The musty smell of hay filled her nostrils as she frantically looked for a place to hide. In the corner was a large pile of fresh hay, likely stored by whoever had abandoned this place not too long ago. Without hesitation, Lucinda burrowed into the hay, creating a small hollow deep within the pile. She placed Samuel inside first, ensuring he had enough space to breathe, then covered herself, pulling strands of hay over their hiding place until they were completely concealed. "Be quiet now, my love," she whispered, placing a gentle kiss on Samuel's forehead. The baby, as if understanding the gravity of their situation, remained astonishingly quiet, his blue eyes so like his father's staring up at her trustingly through the gaps in the hay. Lucinda could see the barn door swing open. Jasper stood there, lantern held high, his face twisted with rage. "I know you're in here, Lucinda. Stop playing games and come out now." Lucinda held her breath, pressing her face into Samuel's hair to stifle her own sobs. She had never felt so trapped, so utterly helpless. Jasper moved through the barn, checking behind stalls and appending barrels in his search. "That boy belongs with his father's family," Jasper snarled, his voice closer now. "You're nothing but a burden, a mistake Thomas made. I'm offering you a chance to stay with the child. Don't make me take him from you by force." Lucinda's hand trembled as she covered Samuel's mouth gently, terrified that he might start crying. The baby's eyes were wide now, sensing his mother's fear, but miraculously he remained silent. Jasper kicked at the hay pile, his boot inches from Lucinda's face. She squeezed her eyes shut, certain that at any moment he would discover them. But then, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made Jasper pause. "Who the hell is that?" he muttered, turning away from the hay pile. Lucinda dared not move even as she heard Jasper walk back toward the barn entrance. There was the sound of voices, Jasper's angry and defensive, the newcomer's deep and steady. Then, unexpectedly, another gunshot tore through the night, followed by the thud of a body hitting the ground. Terror paralyzed Lucinda. She clutched Samuel tighter, pressing her lips to his forehead in what she feared might be a final gesture of love. Footsteps approached the hay pile slowly, deliberately. "Hello," the deep voice called out softly. "I know someone's hiding in here. I'm not going to hurt you." Lucinda remained frozen, too scared to respond. The footsteps came closer. "I saw that man tracking something or someone, the way he was acting. No honest man moves like that when I heard him threatening you." The voice trailed off. "He won't be bothering you again, madam. At least not for a while." I winged him in the shoulder and he rode off. The hay beside Lucinda's head moved, and she stifled a scream as a face appeared in the opening. It was a man in his early 30s with kind brown eyes and a weathered face beneath the brim of a dusty cowboy hat. His expression softened when he saw her cradling Samuel. "Well now," he said gently. "Looks like I found two of you." He extended a hand toward her. "Name's Matthew Fletcher. Most folks call me Matt, and I reckon you and your little one there could use some help." Lucinda hesitated, years of hard-learned caution making her wary of any man's offer of assistance. Matt seemed to sense her reluctance. "I understand your caution, madam, but that man will be back and you can't stay hidden in this hay forever." His eyes moved to Samuel, who was starting to fuss. "You're safe with me, I promise you that." Something in his steady gaze, the way he kept a respectful distance despite having found them, made Lucinda want to trust him, or perhaps it was simply that she had no other choice. "Lucinda," she said finally, her voice hoarse from fear and disuse. "Lucinda O'Malley, and this is my son Samuel." Matt nodded, his smile warm. "Pleased to meet you both, though I wish it were under better circumstances. My ranch is about 3 hours' ride from here. I've got a spare room where you and your boy can rest properly. No one will find you there." He helped her from the hay, steadying her when her legs threatened to buckle after being cramped in the hiding place. As they stepped out of the barn, Lucinda saw the first hints of dawn breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. "Why are you helping us?" she asked as Matt helped her onto his horse, carefully arranging Samuel in her arms before mounting behind her. Matt was quiet for a moment before answering. "My sister was in a situation not unlike yours once. She didn't find help in time." His voice was heavy with an old grief. "I couldn't save her then, but I can help you now." As they rode away from the abandoned homestead, Lucinda found herself leaning back slightly, drawing comfort from the solid presence of the man who had appeared out of nowhere to save them. Samuel, sensing his mother's reduced tension, had fallen back asleep in her arms. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic movement of the horse and the growing warmth of the morning sun lulling Lucinda into a state of calm she hadn't experienced in months. It was only when they stopped briefly to rest the horse that she noticed the blood on Matt's sleeve. "You're hurt," she gasped, reaching out instinctively before pulling back, uncertain of the boundaries with this stranger who was quickly becoming their protector. Matt glanced down at his arm with detached interest. "It's just a graze. Your friend back there got a shot off before I did." "He's not my friend," Lucinda said fiercely. "He's my late husband's brother, Jasper Quinn. He's been hunting us ever since Thomas died." "Quinn," Matt's expression darkened. "From the Double Q Ranch over in Helena County," Lucinda nodded, surprised. "You know them?" "I know of them," Matt replied, his tone guarded. "They have a reputation. Not a good one, especially when it comes to how they acquired some of their land." He didn't elaborate further, and Lucinda didn't press. She had her own reasons to fear the Quinn family, and it seemed Matt had his as well. They continued their journey as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Samuel woke and began to fuss, hungry and uncomfortable in the heat. Matt, showing a surprising understanding of their needs, found a shaded area by a small creek to stop. "We'll rest here for a bit," he said, helping Lucinda down from the horse. "Give the little one a chance to eat and cool off." Lucinda settled on a flat rock by the water's edge, adjusting her dress to nurse Samuel, while Matt tactfully busied himself with watering his horse and checking their surroundings. "Thank you," she said softly when he returned, keeping his eyes carefully averted, "for everything." Matt nodded, the hint of a blush visible beneath his tan. No need for thanks. Anyone with a decent bone in their body would have done the same, but they both knew that wasn't true. In the harsh realities of the frontier, people tended to mind their own business, especially when trouble was involved. The fact that Matt had intervened, putting himself at risk for a woman and child he didn't know, spoke volumes about his character. "How did you come to be out there anyway?" Lucinda asked, curious about the man who had saved them. Matt sat down on a nearby rock, stretching his long legs out before him. "I was heading back from selling some cattle in Cedar Junction. Took the long way home to avoid a storm brewing to the east. Lucky for both of us, I suppose." Samuel finished nursing, and Lucinda adjusted her clothing before lifting him to her shoulder to burp. The baby's tiny hand reached out, grasping at Matt's bandana, which had come loose during their ride. Matt chuckled, gently disentangling the cloth from Samuel's grip. "He's a strong little fella." "Yes," Lucinda smiled, the first genuine smile in what felt like forever. "Just like his father was before." She trailed off, the painful memories still too fresh. Matt seemed to sense her discomfort. "We should get moving again. It's still a good ride to my place, and I'd like to get there before dark." They mounted up once more, this time with Samuel wrapped more securely against the growing heat of the day. As they rode, Lucinda found herself sharing more of her story with Matt, how she'd met Thomas Quinn during a town dance, how charming and attentive he'd been, how quickly things had changed after they married and moved to the Quinn family ranch. "He wasn't a bad man, not really," she explained, feeling somehow compelled to defend the memory of her husband. "Just weak. Couldn't stand up to his father or his brother. The drinking made it worse. By the time Samuel was born, Thomas was rarely sober enough to even hold him." Matt listened without judgment, offering occasional comments or questions that showed he was genuinely interested in understanding her situation. "And after he died," he prompted gently when she fell silent. Lucinda sighed, the weight of the past 6 months pressing down on her. "Jasper changed. Started saying that since Thomas was gone, it was his responsibility to raise Samuel as a Quinn. At first, he suggested Mary said it would be the proper thing to do. When I refused, She unconsciously touched her wrist where the bruises had faded, but the memory remained vivid. "He made it clear he wouldn't take no for an answer. That's when I ran the first time." "The first time?" Matt's voice was carefully controlled, but Lucinda could feel the tension in his body behind her. "He found us in Cripple Creek. I barely got away with Samuel that time. We've been moving ever since, staying nowhere more than a few days. I thought we'd be safe in that abandoned homestead, at least for the night." Her voice broke slightly. "If you hadn't come along when you did." "But I did," Matt said firmly. "And now you've got someone watching your back." The simple declaration, spoken without hesitation or expectation, brought tears to Lucinda's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, not wanting Matt to see how deeply his words had affected her. They crested a small hill, and Matt pointed to a valley below where a modest but well-maintained ranch spread out before them. A 2-story house stood in the center, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. "Welcome to Wildwood Ranch," Matt said, a note of pride in his voice. "It's not much compared to the Double Q, but it's mine, free and clear." As they approached, Lucinda could see that while the ranch wasn't large, it was thriving. The fences were in good repair, the buildings freshly painted, and the cattle looked healthy. This was a place built with care and hard work. An older man emerged from the barn as they rode in, his weathered face breaking into a smile that quickly turned to concern when he saw Lucinda and Samuel. Matthew was beginning to worry about you, boy. Who have you got there? Hank, Matt greeted him, dismounting before helping Lucinda down. This is Mrs. O'Malley and her son, Samuel. They'll be staying with us for a while, Mrs. O'Malley. This is Hank Miller, my foreman and the closest thing to a father I've got. Hank removed his hat, nodding respectfully to Lucinda. Madam, any friend of Matt's is welcome here. Thank you, Mr. Miller, Lucinda replied, touched by the immediate acceptance. Just Hank, madam. We don't stand on ceremony here at Wildwood. Matt handed the reins of his horse to Hank. Could you see to Ranger for me? I'm going to show Mrs. O'Malley to the house, get her and the little one settled. Hank nodded, his eyes lingering on the bloodstain on Matt's sleeve. Trouble. Nothing that followed us here, Matt assured him. I'll fill you in later. The house was modest but comfortable, with solid furniture and touches that spoke of a woman's influence sometime in the past. Handmade quilts, curtains at the windows, dried flowers in a vase on the dining table. Matt showed Lucinda to a clean, airy room on the second floor. This was my mother's sewing room, he explained, pushing the door open. I had Hank move a bed in here a few years back for guests, though we don't get many. The washroom's down the hall. Make yourself at home. Lucinda stepped into the room, taking in the neatly made bed, the small rocking chair by the window, and the bureau with a pitcher and bowl for washing. It wasn't large, but after months of sleeping in barns and abandoned buildings, it looked like paradise. I'll bring up some water for you to freshen up, Matt continued. And I'm sure you're hungry. I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage eggs and bacon without burning them too badly. Lucinda turned to him, suddenly overwhelmed by his kindness. Mr. Fletcher, Matt, he corrected gently. Matt, she amended. I don't know how to thank you for all this. You've put yourself at risk for us and now you're opening your home. I can't possibly repay you. Matt's expression softened. There's nothing to repay, Mrs. O'Malley. I'd like to think someone would do the same for me if I were in trouble. Lucinda, please, she insisted. And I still think you're an exceptional man, Matt Fletcher. Not everyone would have stopped to help a woman hiding in a hay pile with a baby. A faint blush colored Matt's cheeks and he ducked his head slightly. I'll get that water for you, he said, changing the subject. And see about some food. You rest now. Left alone in the room, Lucinda placed Samuel on the bed, surrounding him with pillows to prevent him from rolling off. The baby gurgled happily, his tiny legs kicking in the air, seemingly content with their new surroundings. Lucinda sat beside him, her fingers gently tracing his soft cheek. What do you think, Samuel? She whispered. Have we found a safe place at last? The baby's only response was to grab her finger, his grip surprisingly strong. Lucinda smiled, feeling the weight of fear and exhaustion lifting slightly from her shoulders. They weren't out of danger, yet Jasper Quinn wasn't a man to give up easily, but for the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. Matt returned with a pitcher of warm water and some clean towels. I've put some food on. It'll be ready by the time you've freshened up. Thank you, Lucinda said simply, the words inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. Matt nodded, his eyes lingering on Samuel. He's a handsome boy, got his mother's spirit, I'd wager. The compliment warmed Lucinda in a way she hadn't expected. He's been remarkably good through all this. Sometimes I think he understands more than a baby should. Children are resilient, Matt observed, and they sense when they're loved. That boy knows he's got a mother who'd move heaven and earth to keep him safe. The insight surprised Lucinda. Matt Fletcher was proving to be a man of unexpected depths. Do you have children, Mr. Fletcher? Matt, I mean. A shadow crossed his face briefly. No, madam, never been blessed that way. You seem to have a natural way with them, she commented, watching as Samuel's eyes followed Matt's movements around the room. Matt shrugged, a hint of sadness in his smile. I helped raise my sister's boy for a spell after she passed. He's grown now, off making his way in California. There was a story there Lucinda could tell, but she didn't press. They had only just met, after all, and everyone had parts of themselves they kept hidden. I'll leave you to your washing up, Matt said, moving toward the door. Come down when you're ready, no rush. After he left, Lucinda poured water into the basin and washed her face and hands, the simple act of cleaning away the dust and grime of their journey making her feel more human. She did the same for Samuel, who protested slightly at the cool water but soon giggled as she gently splashed his chubby hands. Feeling refreshed, she carried Samuel downstairs, following the smell of cooking food to the kitchen at the back of the house. Matt stood at the stove, his back to her, turning bacon in a cast-iron skillet. He had removed his coat and rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms tanned from outdoor work. "Something smells wonderful," Lucinda said, announcing her presence. Matt turned, a smile lighting his face when he saw them. "Just in time, have a seat." He gestured to a small kitchen table set for two, a high chair positioned at one end. Lucinda stared at it in surprise. "It was my nephew's," Matt explained, correctly interpreting her expression. "Kept it in the attic all these years. Thought Samuel might make better use of it than the mice up there." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Lucinda placed Samuel in the high chair. It was a little big for him yet, but with a folded blanket positioned around him, he sat comfortably, his curious eyes taking in the new surroundings. Matt served up a simple but hearty meal of eggs, bacon, and biscuits that he admitted were left over from Hank's cooking the day before. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, Lucinda savoring the first home-cooked meal she'd had in weeks. "I've been thinking," Matt said eventually, refilling her coffee cup. "Jasper Quinn isn't likely to give up easily, especially if he's convinced he has some claim to your boy." Lucinda's appetite vanished at the mention of Jasper. "No, he won't. The Quinns are used to getting what they want one way or another. Then we need to make sure he can't find you here," Matt said firmly, "at least until we can figure out a more permanent solution." Lucinda couldn't help but question. Matt met her gaze steadily. "Unless you'd rather handle this alone, I won't force my help on you, Lucinda." "No," she said quickly, realizing she didn't want to face Jasper without Matt's support. "I'm grateful for your help, I don't want to bring trouble to your door." "Trouble has a way of finding me regardless," Matt replied with a wry smile. "At least this time it's for a worthy cause." They discussed options as they finished their meal. Matt suggested that Lucinda and Samuel stay at Wildwood while he rode to the nearest town with a telegraph office to send a message to a friend who worked as a marshal in Helena. "Jacob owes me a favor or two," Matt explained. "He might be able to find out what Jasper's telling people about your disappearance and give us some idea of what we're dealing with legally." Lucinda appreciated Matt's practical approach, but she couldn't help but worry. The Quinns have influence throughout the territory. Even if Jasper doesn't have any legal right to Samuel, he could make life difficult for anyone who helps us. "Let me worry about that," Matt said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The important thing now is keeping you and Samuel safe while we sort this out." After breakfast, Matt showed Lucinda around the ranch. Despite her protests that he should rest and have his arm tended to properly, he insisted that she needed to know her way around if she was going to stay there. The wound, he maintained, was nothing more than a scratch. Wildwood Ranch was smaller than the sprawling Double Q, but impressive in its efficiency. Matt had built it from nearly nothing over the past 10 years, starting with just a few head of cattle and the run-down cabin that still stood behind the main house. "Used to be a trapper's place," Matt explained as they walked past the old cabin. "Lived in it for 3 years while I saved enough to build the house. Still use it for storage mostly, though Hank stays there sometimes in the winter when the weather's too bad for him to make it back to his own place." Lucinda was struck by the pride Matt took in his ranch, pointing out improvements he'd made and plans for future expansions. This was a man who built things to last, who looked to the future with confidence and determination. It was a stark contrast to Thomas, whose dreams had always been as insubstantial as morning fog, disappearing with the harsh light of reality. Samuel, strapped to Lucinda's chest in a makeshift sling Matt had fashioned from a clean flour sack, seemed equally fascinated by their surroundings. His tiny hands reached out toward the cattle in the nearest pasture, and he gurgled with delight when Matt's dog, a black and white border collie named Patch, came bounding up to investigate the newcomers. "He's good with children," Matt assured Lucinda when she instinctively pulled Samuel closer. "Raised him from a pup. Best cattle dog I've ever had, too." As if to prove Matt's point, Patch sat obediently at their feet, his intelligent eyes fixed on Samuel with gentle curiosity. After a moment, Lucinda relaxed, allowing the dog to sniff at Samuel's dangling feet. The baby squealed with delight, and Patch's tail wagged furiously in response. They ended their tour at the corral where Hank was working with a young horse, guiding it around the enclosure with practiced ease. The older man nodded to them as they approached. "Mrs. O'Malley," he greeted her. "Settling in all right, please call me Lucinda," she insisted. "And yes, thank you, you have a beautiful ranch here." "Can't take much credit for that," Hank said, gesturing toward Matt. "This boy built most of it himself. Stubborn as a mule, works harder than two men, but he's got a good head on his shoulders." Matt looked slightly embarrassed by the praise. "Hank helped plenty, taught me everything I know about ranching." "You were a quick study," Hank replied with obvious pride. He turned his attention to Samuel, who was watching the horse with wide eyes. "That's a fine boy you've got there, madam. How old is he?" 3 months next week," Lucinda answered, adjusting Samuel in his sling. "Though sometimes I think he believes he's much older, the way he tries to keep up with everything around him." Hank chuckled. "Got an old soul, that one. You can tell by the eyes." They chatted for a few minutes more before Matt suggested they head back to the house. The sun was high now, and he was concerned about Samuel being out in the heat for too long. "I need to ride to Cedar Junction this afternoon," Matt told Lucinda as they walked back. "Send that telegraph to Jacob and pick up a few supplies. Will you be all right here with Hank for a few hours?" Lucinda nodded, though the thought of Matt leaving even briefly made her anxious. "Of course. We've imposed on you enough without delaying your work." Matt stopped, turning to face her fully. "Lucinda, I want to be clear about something. You and Samuel aren't imposing. You're welcome here for as long as you need to stay. I don't want you worrying about that on top of everything else." His sincerity was unmistakable, and Lucinda felt a rush of gratitude that nearly brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you, Matt, truly." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that made him look younger, more carefree. "You're welcome. Now, let's get you and the little one out of this sun." Back at the house, Lucinda insisted on tending to Matt's arm properly before he left for town. The wound was indeed minor. The bullet had grazed his upper arm, leaving a shallow furrow that had already stopped bleeding, but it still needed cleaning to prevent infection. Matt sat patiently at the kitchen table as Lucinda gently cleaned the wound with warm water and soap, then applied a salve she found in the medical kit Matt had directed her to. Her fingers worked deftly, the skill born from years of tending to Thomas's injuries after his drunken brawls. "You've done this before," Matt observed quietly, Lucinda's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. "My husband. He had a talent for finding trouble, especially when he'd been drinking." Matt's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, allowing her to continue her ministrations in silence. When she had finished bandaging his arm, he thanked her with a warmth that made her cheeks flush slightly. "It's the least I could do," she said, busying herself with packing away the medical supplies to hide her reaction. "After everything you've done for us." Matt left for Cedar Junction shortly after, promising to return before nightfall. Lucinda watched him ride away with a strange mixture of emotions she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, certainly, and relief at having found a safe haven, however temporary. But there was something else. Too, a flutter of awareness she hadn't felt in a very long time, not since the early days with Thomas, before everything had gone so terribly wrong. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the practical matters at hand. Samuel needed changing, and she had offered to prepare dinner for when Matt returned. It had been months since she'd had access to a proper kitchen, and the prospect of cooking a real meal was unexpectedly exciting. Hank joined her briefly in the kitchen, showing her where everything was kept and offering to bring in fresh vegetables from the small garden behind the house. He was a man of few words, but his quiet efficiency and respectful manner put Lucinda at ease. "Matt's a good man," Hank said as he placed a basket of carrots, potatoes, and green beans on the counter. "Best I've ever known. Whatever trouble you're in, you landed in the right place." Lucinda looked up from where she was kneading dough for bread, Samuel sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle Matt had fashioned from a drawer lined with blankets. "I'm beginning to believe that myself," she admitted, "though I worry about bringing danger to your door." Hank's weathered face creased in a smile. "Wouldn't be the first time. Matt has a habit of standing up for folks who need help, consequences be damned. Got that from his father." "He mentioned his sister," Lucinda said cautiously, curious but not wanting to pry. "Said she was in a similar situation to mine once." Hank's expression grew somber. "Rachel. She married young to a man none of us much liked. Turned out we were right to worry. He was mean as a snake, especially when he drank. By the time she got up the courage to leave him, it was too late." He shook his head, the memory clearly painful. "Matt was away, working a cattle drive-up in Wyoming, blamed himself for not being here when she needed him, though there wasn't anything he could have done." "That's terrible," Lucinda whispered, her heart aching for the young woman she'd never met and for Matt, carrying such a burden of grief and guilt. "It was a long time ago," Hank said, his voice gruff with emotion, "but it shaped him, made him the man he is today. There's not a person in need that Matthew Fletcher would turn away, especially a woman and child in danger." The revelation gave Lucinda a deeper understanding of Matt's immediate willingness to help them, his promise of protection that came with no expectations attached. It wasn't just kindness that motivated him. It was a deeply personal mission born from tragedy. As she continued her preparations for dinner, Lucinda found herself thinking about Matt more than she should. There was something about him, a quiet strength, an unflinching integrity that drew her in despite her best intentions to keep her focus solely on Samuel's safety and future. Thomas had been charming and passionate, sweeping her off her feet with grand gestures and even grander promises. Matt was different, steady, thoughtful, his actions speaking far louder than any words. The contrast was stark, and Lucinda couldn't help but wonder if her judgment in men had improved or if she was simply vulnerable to any kindness after months of fear and isolation. Matt returned just as the sun was beginning to set, bringing with him supplies from town and news that made Lucinda's blood run cold. "Jasper Quinn has put out word that his sister-in-law has abducted his nephew," Matt reported grimly as they sat at the kitchen table, the remains of dinner pushed aside. "He's offering a reward for information leading to your whereabouts." Lucinda's hands trembled as she held her coffee cup. "How much?" $500. She closed her eyes briefly, the magnitude of the sum confirming her worst fears. "He's not going to stop." "No," Matt agreed, his expression grave. "But neither are we. Jacob's looking into the legal side of things. Without a will naming Jasper as Samuel's guardian, he has no automatic claim just because he's the boy's uncle. And given what you've told me about his behavior, no judge with any sense would grant him custody." "The Quinns have money and influence," Lucinda reminded him. "And I'm just a widow with no family and few resources. In the eyes of many, Samuel would be better off with his father's wealthy relatives than with a mother who can barely provide for him." Matt reached across the table, his hand covering hers in a gesture of reassurance. "That's not how the law works, Lucinda. A mother has rights to her child unless she's proven unfit, which you most certainly are not. And influence only goes so far when it comes to children's welfare." His touch was warm and steady, and Lucinda found herself drawing strength from it. "What did your friend suggest we do?" "Jacob's going to file a report about Jasper's threats and attempted abduction. He's also going to see about getting a restraining order, though enforcement out here can be tricky." In the meantime, he thinks you should stay put, somewhere safe, until this can be resolved legally. Here, Lucinda asked, already knowing the answer. Matt nodded. If you're willing. No one in town knows about you being here, and I trust my men completely. Jasper Quinn would have no reason to look for you at Wildwood. I can't ask you to take on that risk, Matt, if he found out you were harboring us. You didn't ask, Matt pointed out gently. I offered, and I'm not afraid of Jasper Quinn or his family. Lucinda studied his face, seeing the determination there. Matt Fletcher wasn't a man who made promises lightly, she was beginning to realize. If he said they were safe with him, then he would move heaven and earth to make it so. All right, she agreed finally. We'll stay, at least until we hear from your friend Jacob, but I insist on earning my keep. I can cook, clean, mend. I won't be a burden. Matt's expression softened. You could never be a burden, Lucinda, but if it makes you feel better, I won't say no to more meals like the one we just had. Been a long time since this house had a woman's touch. The warmth in his voice caused that flutter again in Lucinda's chest, and she looked away, flustered by her own reaction. Well then, it's settled. Samuel and I will stay, and I'll make sure you and Hank are properly fed. Matt smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. Sounds like a fair bargain to me. In the days that followed, Lucinda and Samuel settled into life at Wildwood Ranch with surprising ease. Matt had been right, the remote location, and the loyalty of his ranch hands ensured their presence remained a secret. Lucinda found herself relaxing more with each passing day, the constant fear that had been her companion for months gradually receding. She kept busy, taking over the cooking and much of the housekeeping, tasks she found unexpectedly satisfying after so long on the run. Samuel thrived in the stable environment, growing more alert and active each day. He particularly seemed to enjoy being outside, watching the ranch activities from the safety of Lucinda's arms or his makeshift cradle on the porch. Matt, for his part, went about his daily work running the ranch while making time to check on Lucinda and Samuel throughout the day. He was unfailingly kind but respectful of her space, never presuming or overstepping. In the evenings, they would often sit on the porch after dinner, talking as the sun set over the mountains in the distance. It was during these quiet conversations that Lucinda began to know the real Matthew Fletcher. He told her about growing up in Missouri, losing his parents to influenza when he was 16, and heading west with his sister Rachel shortly after. They had settled in Montana territory because Rachel had fallen in love with the mountains, he explained. After her death, he had stayed, building Wildwood Ranch partly as a tribute to her memory. In turn, Lucinda shared her own story, her childhood in a small town in Pennsylvania, her parents' early deaths that had left her in the care of a distant aunt, her decision to head west as a schoolteacher in search of adventure and opportunity. Meeting Thomas Quinn had seemed like fate at the time, a chance at the family and security she had always longed for. I was so naive, she admitted one evening, Samuel sleeping peacefully in her lap as they watched the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. I thought love would be enough, that it would change him, make him stronger, better. Matt was quiet for a moment before responding. Love can bring out the best in people, it's true, but it can't create something that wasn't there to begin with. The insight struck Lucinda profoundly. Yes, she agreed softly. I see that now. Thomas had his good qualities. He could be generous and loving when he wanted to be, but at his core he was weak, easily influenced by his father and brother, unable to stand on his own 2 feet. That's not your fault, Matt said firmly. And it doesn't mean you were wrong to love him or to try to build a life with him. No, Lucinda sighed, but I should have seen the signs earlier, before we were married, before Samuel. Matt turned to look at her, his expression gentle in the fading light. Do you regret having Samuel? Never, Lucinda answered without hesitation, her arms tightening slightly around her sleeping son. He's the one pure, perfect thing to come from my marriage. I could never regret him. Then it wasn't all for nothing, Matt said simply. Sometimes the journey is difficult, even painful, but it leads us where we're meant to be." His words settled over Lucinda like a comforting blanket. She wondered if Matt could possibly be right, if all the heartache and fear of the past year had been leading her and Samuel to this place, to the safety and peace of Wildwood Ranch. To Matt himself, the thought should have alarmed her. It was too soon after Thomas's death, too soon after the trauma of fleeing Jasper, to be thinking of another man in any way beyond gratitude for his help. And yet, sitting beside Matt on the porch of his home, with Samuel sleeping contentedly in her arms, Lucinda couldn't deny the sense of rightness she felt. A week after their arrival at Wildwood, Matt received a telegram from his friend Jacob. The news was mixed. Jacob had filed reports about Jasper's threats and attempted abduction, but without witnesses beyond Lucinda herself, it was difficult to prove. The restraining order was in process, but would take time. Most concerning was the news that Jasper had increased the reward for information about Lucinda and Samuel to $1,000, a sum that would tempt even the most honorable of citizens. "He's getting desperate," Matt observed as he shared the news with Lucinda. "That's good and bad. Good because it suggests he doesn't have any solid leads on your whereabouts. Bad because desperate men do desperate things." Lucinda nodded, her earlier sense of security shaken. "What do we do now?" "We stay the course," Matt replied firmly. "You and Samuel remain here where it's safe. Jacob's going to keep working on the legal side of things. He's also reached out to a judge he trusts in Helena who might be willing to hear your case directly. And in the meantime, we just wait." Lucinda found the prospect frustrating after months of taking action, even if that action had been running. Matt seemed to understand her restlessness. "Not just wait, live. You and Samuel deserve that much at least. And Jasper Quinn has taken enough from you already without stealing your peace of mind as well." His perspective helped, as did his steady presence and unwavering confidence that they would find a resolution. As days turned into weeks, Lucinda found herself slipping into a routine that felt remarkably like normal life. She took over the vegetable garden behind the house, expanded her cooking repertoire using recipes from Matt's mother's old cookbook, and even began to teach herself to ride properly on a gentle mare Matt selected for her from his small herd. Samuel grew steadily, reaching milestones that filled Lucinda with pride and joy: his first real laugh, his growing ability to hold his head up, his fascination with the world around him. Matt took a particular delight in the baby's development, often spending his evenings on the floor of the living room, encouraging Samuel's attempts to roll over and grasp toys. Watching them together, Lucinda felt a bittersweet pang. This was what Samuel should have had from the beginning: a strong, loving male presence in his life. Thomas had barely acknowledged his son's existence, too consumed by his own demons to appreciate the miracle he had helped create. Matt, who had no blood connection to Samuel at all, showed more genuine interest and affection than the baby's own father ever had. It was during one such evening, as Matt was entertaining Samuel with a carved wooden horse while Lucinda mended one of Matt's shirts by the fire, that she realized with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with Matthew Fletcher. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it filled her with a quiet certainty. This was nothing like the whirlwind passion she had felt for Thomas. This was deeper, steadier, a recognition of something essential and true. She kept the revelation to herself, uncertain if Matt felt anything beyond kindness and perhaps friendship toward her. There were moments when she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart race, but he was always quick to turn away, to maintain the respectful distance he had established from the beginning. Their peaceful routine was shattered one afternoon in early autumn when one of Matt's ranch hands, a young man named Caleb, came galloping into the yard, his horse lathered and his expression grim. "Boss," he called out as Matt emerged from the barn, "riders coming from the east. 4 of them moving fast. One of them looks like Jasper Quinn." Lucinda, who had been hanging laundry on the line behind the house, felt her blood turn to ice at the words. Matt's reaction was immediate and decisive. "Get Hank and the others," he ordered Caleb. "Tell them to spread out along the property line. No shooting unless absolutely necessary, but make it clear they're not welcome here." As Caleb rode off to relay the instructions, Matt turned to Lucinda. "Take Samuel and go to the old cabin," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "There's a cellar beneath the floor, used to be for storing furs and game. The trapdoor is under the rug by the stove. Go there and stay quiet no matter what you hear. I'll come for you when it's safe." Lucinda wanted to protest, to insist on staying by Matt's side, but Samuel's safety had to come first. She nodded, gathering the baby from his basket on the porch and hurrying toward the old cabin behind the main house. The interior was dim and smelled of dust and old wood, but it was clean and orderly, clearly still used for storage as Matt had mentioned. Lucinda quickly found the rug and pulled it aside, revealing a trapdoor with an iron ring handle. With Samuel clutched tightly to her chest, she lifted the door and descended the narrow stairs into the darkness below. The cellar was small but not cramped, with a packed earth floor and rough stone walls. A narrow shelf along one wall held several lanterns and candles, and Lucinda fumbled in the dim light filtering from above to light one of the candles. She closed the trapdoor carefully, plunging them into near darkness save for the small flame. Samuel, sensing his mother's tension, began to fuss. Lucinda rocked him gently, whispering soothing words while straining to hear any sounds from outside. At first, there was nothing but the usual ranch noises: distant cattle, the occasional neighing of horses. Then came the sound of hoofbeats approaching, followed by men's voices, too indistinct to make out the words but the tone clear enough: angry, demanding. Matt's voice rose in response, firm and uncompromising. Lucinda couldn't distinguish the exact exchange, but she could imagine Matt standing his ground, refusing to be intimidated. The voices grew louder, more heated, and then came a sound that made Lucinda's heart stop a gunshot. Samuel, startled by the noise, began to cry in earnest. Lucinda clutched him close, her hand over his mouth to muffle the sound, tears streaming down her own face as she prayed fervently for Matt's safety. More shots followed, then shouting, the sounds of a struggle, and then silence. Lucinda waited, her heart pounding so loudly in her ears she was certain anyone above would hear it. The silence stretched on, unbearable in its ambiguity. Was Matt hurt, captured? Had Jasper and his men found whatever evidence of her presence might have been in the house and were now searching the property? Samuel had quieted somewhat, but he was still fussing, hungry and uncomfortable in the confined space. Lucinda knew she couldn't stay in the cellar indefinitely. The baby needed food, clean clothes. But the thought of emerging into an uncertain situation, possibly into Jasper's waiting arms, filled her with dread. Just as she was trying to decide how much longer to wait, she heard footsteps above, then the sound of the cabin door opening. Someone was moving around in the small space, their steps slow and deliberate. Lucinda held her breath, pulling Samuel closer to her chest protectively. Lucinda. Matt's voice, strained but unmistakable, called out, "It's safe now. You can come out." Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her dizzy. She pushed open the trapdoor, squinting in the sudden light to find Matt standing in the center of the cabin. The sight of him made her gasp. His face was bruised, a cut above his eye bleeding freely, and he was holding his left arm at an awkward angle that suggested injury. "Matt, you're hurt," she cried, scrambling up the stairs with Samuel still clutched to her chest. "It's nothing serious," he assured her, though his grimace as he moved belied his words. "Jasper and his men are gone. Hank and the boys convinced them it wasn't worth pushing their luck. Convinced them how?" Lucinda asked, her eyes moving to the bloodstain on Matt's shirt that didn't seem to match any visible wound. "No one was killed, if that's what you're asking," Matt replied, understanding her concern. "There was some shooting, but mostly for show." Jasper took a bullet in the leg, not life-threatening, but enough to discourage further hostilities for the moment. "And you," Lucinda pressed, setting Samuel down on the cabin's small bed so she could examine Matt's injuries more closely. "Took a fall when one of Quinn's men tried to drag me off my horse," Matt admitted. "Shoulders dislocated, I think, and some cuts and bruises. Nothing that won't heal." The matter-of-fact way he described his injuries, sustained in defense of her and Samuel, brought tears to Lucinda's eyes. "This is exactly what I feared," she whispered. "You getting hurt because of us." Matt reached out with his good hand, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his gaze. "This isn't on you, Lucinda. This is on Jasper Quinn and his warped sense of entitlement. And I'd take these injuries and worse to keep you and Samuel safe." The intensity in his eyes took her breath away. This wasn't just the protective instinct of a good man, she realized. This was something more, something deeper. "Why?" she asked softly, needing to hear him say it. Matt's expression softened, vulnerability replacing the fierce determination of a moment before. "Because in these past weeks, you and Samuel have become more important to me than I ever thought possible. Because the thought of either of you being hurt or taken away." He paused, struggling to find the words. "Because I love you, Lucinda, both of you, and I know it's too soon, that you're still healing from everything that's happened, but I needed you to know." Lucinda's heart soared at his declaration, even as her practical mind raised cautions and doubts. It was too soon, wasn't it? She was still legally in mourning for Thomas, still dealing with the trauma of her flight from Jasper. And yet, her feelings for Matt had grown steadily, naturally, over their time together, not the blinding passion she had mistaken for love with Thomas, but something quieter and infinitely stronger. "It's not too soon," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not when it feels this right. I love you too, Matt. I think I have for weeks now, but I was afraid of trusting my own judgment again, afraid of bringing more complications into your life." Matt's smile, despite his injuries, was radiant. "You could never be a complication, Lucinda. You and Samuel. You're a blessing I never expected." Samuel chose that moment to voice his displeasure at being ignored, his cries reminding them both of the practicalities that needed attention. Lucinda picked him up, soothing him with gentle bounces, while Matt watched them with such naked love in his eyes that it made her breath catch. "We should get back to the house," Matt said after a moment. "I need to send someone to town to fetch the doctor, and you and Samuel could use something to eat after being cooped up in that cellar." Lucinda nodded, but before they left the cabin, she reached up to place a gentle kiss on Matt's uninjured cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Matt's good arm wrapped around her waist, drawing her and Samuel close in a careful embrace. "No need for thanks between family," he replied softly, "and that's what we are now, if you'll have it so. Family." The word filled Lucinda with a warmth and certainty she had never known, not even in the early, happy days of her marriage to Thomas. This was what she had been searching for all along, not just love, but a true partnership, a man who would stand beside her through whatever storms life might bring. "Yes," she agreed, leaning into his embrace. "Family." The confrontation with Jasper Quinn marked a turning point in their lives. News of the skirmish at Wildwood Ranch spread quickly through the territory, along with the reason behind it, Jasper's relentless pursuit of his brother's widow and child. Public opinion, already skeptical of the Quinn's business practices, turned firmly against Jasper when the full story emerged. Jacob, Matt's Marshall friend, arrived at Wildwood 2 days after the incident, bringing with him a judge who had agreed to hear Lucinda's case directly. In the formal setting of Matt's dining room, Lucinda recounted the entire ordeal: Thomas's death, Jasper's threats and attempts to force her into marriage, her months on the run, and the final confrontation at Wildwood. The judge, a stern older man named Hollister with piercing blue eyes and a reputation for fairness, listened attentively, asking occasional questions but mostly allowing Lucinda to tell her story uninterrupted. When she had finished, he turned his attention to Matt, who provided his own account of finding Lucinda and Samuel hidden in the hay pile and the subsequent events. "This is a disturbing situation, Mrs. Quinn," Judge Hollister said when both had concluded their testimonies. "Disturbing, but unfortunately not unique. The law is clear, however. As Samuel's mother, you have primary custody rights. Without evidence of unsuitability on your part, which I certainly see none of, or a valid will from your late husband specifically designating his brother as guardian, Mr. Jasper Quinn has no legal claim to your son whatsoever." The relief those words brought was overwhelming. Lucinda felt tears welling in her eyes as the judge continued. "Furthermore, based on the testimony I've heard here today and the corroborating reports from Marshal Jenkins, I am issuing a restraining order against Jasper Quinn, prohibiting him from approaching within 500 yards of you or your son. Any violation will result in his immediate arrest and imprisonment." "Thank you, Your Honor," Lucinda managed, her voice thick with emotion. "But will a piece of paper really stop him? He's already shown he's willing to break the law to get what he wants." Judge Hollister's expression was grave. "A valid concern, Mrs. Quinn. The law is only as effective as those willing to enforce it. But I believe Mr. Quinn will find his options severely limited now that his actions have become public knowledge. The territorial governor is particularly interested in this case, given recent complaints about the Quinn family's business dealings. Jasper Quinn would be well advised to accept this ruling and move on with his life." The judge's words proved prophetic. In the weeks that followed, Jasper Quinn withdrew the reward offer for information about Lucinda and Samuel's whereabouts. Reports from Helena suggested that the Quinn patriarch, furious at the negative attention his younger son had brought to the family, had essentially cut Jasper off until he straightened himself out. With the immediate threat receding, Lucinda and Matt began to discuss their future in earnest. Their feelings for each other had only grown stronger through the ordeal, but both were conscious of the need to proceed with care and consideration, particularly for Samuel's sake. "I don't want to rush you," Matt said one evening as they sat on the porch swing, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle beside them. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. "You've been through so much, and the last thing I want is to add to your burdens." Lucinda smiled, touched by his consideration. "You've never been a burden, Matt, just the opposite. You and this place, you've given Samuel and me a chance to heal, to feel safe again." "I want to give you so much more than that," Matt said earnestly, taking her hand in his. "I want to give you a home, a family, a lifetime of security and happiness. I want to be a father to Samuel, to raise him alongside you, to teach him how to be a good man." The image his words conjured of the three of them building a life together at Wildwood, of Samuel growing up strong and secure under Matt's guidance, of perhaps more children joining their family in time, filled Lucinda with a quiet joy that far outshone anything she had experienced before. "I want that too," she admitted, squeezing his hand. "All of it, but society has expectations," Matt finished for her, understanding her hesitation. "About proper mourning periods and such." Lucinda nodded. "It's not that I care so much for myself, but for Samuel's sake, for his future. I don't want there to ever be any whispers or doubts about his legitimacy or our choices." Matt considered this thoughtfully. "What if we had a long engagement? A year, perhaps, to satisfy propriety, we could announce it publicly, make our intentions clear. You and Samuel would stay here. Of course, no one who knows the situation would question that arrangement given the circumstances. And then, when the time is right, we could be married properly, with the blessing of the community and the law." The proposal was sensible, respectful of both tradition and their unique situation. More importantly, it acknowledged the depth of their commitment to each other while giving them time to continue building the foundation of their relationship. "Yes," Lucinda agreed, her heart full. "A long engagement sounds perfect." The months that followed were some of the happiest of Lucinda's life. Free from the constant fear of Jasper's pursuit, she blossomed at Wildwood Ranch, taking on more responsibilities and making the place truly her home. Matt, true to his word, proved to be a patient and devoted suitor, courting her with small, meaningful gestures rather than grand displays wildflowers picked during his rounds of the property. A rocking chair he built himself for the nursery, evenings spent teaching her to play chess by the fire. Their engagement was announced formally at Christmas, during a small gathering at Wildwood that included Hank, Jacob and his wife, the local pastor, and several of Matt's closest neighbors. The news was met with genuine warmth and approval, confirming Matt's standing in the community and the acceptance of Lucinda and Samuel as part of his life. Samuel thrived under the loving attention of both Lucinda and Matt. By his first birthday in early summer, he was crawling everywhere, babbling constantly, and showing a particular fascination with the ranch animals. His first word, to Matt's undisguised delight, was horse, though Mama followed closely after. The wedding took place the following autumn, a crisp October day with the aspens turning gold against the deep blue Montana sky. It was a simple ceremony held at Wildwood with Samuel, now a sturdy toddler, serving as ring-bearer with Hank's careful assistance. Lucinda wore a gown of cream-colored silk that Matt had ordered from Denver, while Matt cut a handsome figure in a new black suit. "I, Matthew, take you, Lucinda, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Matt's voice rang out clear and sure as they stood before the pastor, their hands joined. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." As Lucinda repeated the same vows, she was struck by how different this felt from her first wedding. With Thomas, there had been nerves and excitement, yes, but also an underlying uncertainty she had chosen to ignore. With Matt, there was only absolute conviction, a bone-deep certainty that this man would stand beside her through whatever life might bring. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared. "You may kiss your bride." Matt's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, a perfect beginning to their life together. As they turned to face their small gathering of guests, Samuel broke free from Hank's hold and toddled toward them, arms outstretched. Matt scooped him up effortlessly, and the three of them stood together, a family united at last. The celebration that followed was joyful and relaxed, with plenty of food, music, and dancing in the barn that had been decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons for the occasion. As the evening wore on, Lucinda found herself watching Matt dance with Mrs. Jenkins, Jacob's wife, while Samuel slept peacefully in a makeshift bed nearby, exhausted from the excitement of the day. "You look happy," Hank observed, coming to stand beside her. "Suits you." Lucinda smiled, unable to deny the truth of his words. "I am happy. Happier than I ever thought possible after everything that happened." Hank nodded, his weathered face softening with approval. "Matt, too. Never seen him like this, not in all the years I've known him. You and that boy there, you've given him something he's been searching for his whole life." "What's that?" Lucinda asked, curious. "Purpose," Hank replied simply. "Beyond the ranch, beyond the day-to-day, a reason to build something lasting, a family to call his own." Lucinda's eyes filled with tears at the simple truth of Hank's words. That was exactly what Matt had given her and Samuel, as well, a sense of belonging, of permanence, after so much uncertainty and fear. The music ended, and Matt made his way back to her, his face flushed from dancing and happiness. "Mrs. Fletcher," he greeted her, the new name sending a thrill through her. "May I have this dance, always," Lucinda replied, taking his outstretched hand. As they moved together to the music, surrounded by friends and well-wishers, Lucinda reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the terrifying night she had hidden with Samuel in that hay pile to now, dancing at their wedding, it seemed both an eternity and an instant. "What are you thinking about?" Matt murmured, his arms secure around her waist. "About how close I came to never meeting you," Lucinda admitted. If you hadn't decided to take that route home if you hadn't heard Jasper. Matt's expression grew serious. I've thought about that too, but I prefer to believe it wasn't just chance that brought us together. Call it fate, Providence. Whatever you like, something led me to that barn that night. Something put you and Samuel in my path when you needed help and I needed. He paused, searching for the right words. When I needed to be reminded that there are things worth fighting for in this world. Lucinda reached up to touch his face, her heart full of love for this man who had risked everything to protect her and her son. I'm glad you found us, Matt Fletcher. So am I, Lucinda Fletcher, he replied, leaning down to kiss her softly. So am I. As the years passed, Wildwood Ranch prospered under their joint care, expanding in size and reputation throughout the territory. Samuel grew into a fine young man, with Matt's steady character and Lucinda's quick intelligence. He was joined by two sisters, Rachel, named for Matt's beloved sister, and Elizabeth, after Lucinda's mother. Jasper Quinn never troubled them again, having moved to California after a final confrontation with his father over the family business. The old Quinn patriarch passed away some years later, leaving the Double Q Ranch to be divided among distant relatives, its influence in the territory greatly diminished. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Matt and Lucinda would often sit on the porch swing, watching the stars appear over the mountains just as they had in those early days of their relationship. Sometimes they would speak of the past, of the hay pile where they had first met, of the cellar where they had sheltered during Jasper's attack, of the small cabin that had been converted into a schoolroom for their children. But more often, they would talk of the future, of their hopes for their children, of their plans for the ranch, of the community they were helping to build in this wild, beautiful corner of Montana. And in those moments, Lucinda would feel a profound gratitude for the twists of fate that had led her to this place and this man, who had found her at her most vulnerable and promised her safety, only to give her so much more: a home, a family, and a love that had proven stronger than all the hardships they had faced together. You're safe with me, Matt had told her that first night as she and Samuel emerged from their hiding place in the hay. It was a promise he had kept faithfully through all the years since, a foundation upon which they had built their lives together. And in that safety, they had found not just protection, but the freedom to love, to grow, to create something beautiful and lasting in a world that had once seemed so threatening and uncertain. For Lucinda Fletcher, née O'Malley, who had once hidden her child in hay to keep him safe from harm, that was the greatest blessing of all: the knowledge that in running from danger, she had ultimately run straight into the arms of her destiny and the love of her life.